The subject that I'd like to talk to you about this morning is restructuring education through technology. And it's going to come in two parts. One is a model for restructuring classroom instruction, and the second is a much more esoteric subject, and that is a model for restructuring learning itself. We're moving rapidly into an information age in which the quality of its human resources will determine a nation's success or failure. In information age, society's single most important function becomes the development of its human resources. And I believe that this will have a profound effect on how we educate our children and how we educate and re-educate our workers at all levels in our society. I'd like to talk to you about a vision. And this is a vision of how technology will be used in teaching and learning as we go down the road into the last decade of this century. It also requires a kind of restructuring, but it is more mental restructuring. It's a new way of thinking about knowledge itself and how knowledge will be structured as we move on towards the 21st century. It seems to me that motivation is the single most important element in learning. And motivation is a key problem for today's teachers as they deal with today's children. To net it out, how do we motivate high-tech kids in a low-tech classroom? Can we make education more exciting than MTV? Robert Pittman, who was the creator of MTV, said, "We're talking the wrong language to TV babies." He said, TV babies have one thing in common that distinguishes them from their parents: the way they receive and process information. And now with the computer, for the first time, we have technology that interacts intelligently with its users. And I believe that multimedia computers will create the new knowledge of the 21st century. About a month ago, we started on a project which we call ULYSSES. And the goal was to build a prototype of a linked knowledge system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a demonstration of a linked knowledge system. Is ULYSSES. What I have is I have a PS2, I have a laser disc, and I have a mouse. Want to bring that up on the screen for me, please? And so now what you see up in front of you is the first part of Tennyson's poem Ulysses. It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. Now, I'd like to have a dramatic reading of these first 5 lines, this first stanza. So, I'm going to go in, and if you notice on the left-hand side, I have some buttons that I can click to navigate around this knowledge base. So I'm going to click on Interpret. I'm going to click on Reading. And that's going to offer me some choice people that I might have poem for me. And I'm going to pick Mr. Horn.
It little that an idle king by the still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me.
I thought he did it a little better than I did. Now, one of the problems with this class is this poem was written a little over 100 years ago, and at that time, students studied the great works. They read Homer, they read the Iliad, they read the Odyssey, but not too many students today are reading Homer. So what I might want to do is try to put this in context. Okay? So I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to click on Context, and I'm going to click on the first stanza, and let's see if we can put this in a little context.
Ulysses is a pirate. He's a pirate king. who has gone off on the greatest adventure anybody has ever gone on in his world. He went off with his whole crew to conquer a city at the ends of the earth, the city of Troy, and won that city back after 10 years of fighting. They managed to break through the walls and take the city. And then it took him another 10 years to get back home again, wandering all over the Mediterranean Sea and having every imaginable kind of adventure. And in the course of doing that, he really grew as a person, but he became distant from the people back home. They didn't know who he was anymore, except he was a name. He was just a distant name to them. And now he's come back home again, but he finds it kind of an empty experience compared to the world he's been in. Just being at home is kind of limiting to him, and he's restless at this point in his life.
One of the difficulties I might have with my students is that some of the words that poets use are not familiar to them. So I might, words like hearth, crags, meat, words like that might not have a meaning to them. So I have the capability of going in and saying, define, and now I'll come up and I'll click on hearth.
Hearth, noun. 1. The floor of a fireplace, usually of stone or brick, often extending a short distance into a room. 2. Home, fireside. The joys of family and hearth.
Obviously, in this situation, the second definition is the one that Tennyson meant. Okay, now what I'd like to do now is go on and read the poem a little bit further. So I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff, get it out of the way. And I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And now I'm going to carry on with the poem. I'm going to hit interpret, reading. And now let's get a different person reading the poem and see what his interpretation is like. So I'm going to click on Mr. Neville.
I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone, on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vex the dim sea. I am become a name, for always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known. Cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy.
Now, depending upon how words are enunciated, we can get quite different meanings. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to move it down a little bit further. Let's take these first 4 words, this is my son, and let's have them read with a different connotation. For example, I'm going to go up and click on this is my son. I'm going to illuminate that. And then I'm going to hit interpret. And then I'm going to hit seeing. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to hit reveal. Now, I have a choice. I'll have him read it with disdain. Then I'll have him read it with pride about his son, and maybe even envy. So let's look at the first. I'll come down and I'll click on disdain, and I'll ask him to put that in his voice.
This is my son.
Some of you may have felt that from time to time. Now let's change the other way, and I'm sure more of you have felt this.
This is my son.
Okay, now I'm going to scroll down further, and I'm going to read the rest of the poem. So I'm going to go back up to interpret. I'm going to go seeing, and I kind of like the way Ravel does this, so I'm going to let him do the rest of it.
There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all. But something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off! Sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the bars of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that we are. Temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
Now, one of the other things that I have the ability to do is to call in some experts on poetry and get their opinions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to scroll down a little further, and I'm going to go back in and I'm going to hit interpret again. And now I'm going to go over and I'm going to click on opinions. And this allows me to select from a number of experts, and I will go in and look at Mrs. Shore, and let's see what her views are about this poem.
I think that Ulysses is not going to go anywhere. I think that this is the only voyage ahead of Ulysses is a voyage into death, the final voyage. And I think every syllable of the poem suggests that. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield is very noble, but the last word is yield. That it's a soft sound. It's not the kind of hard, ringing line that people try to say it is. And everything in the poem speaks to me of death, of sadness, of negation, of an ending, rather than a beginning.
I don't agree with that at all. I have a much more optimistic, a much more positive view of this poem. But let's go and get another view. We'll bring down Mr. Kincaid.
Many readers have read the poem as in fact not simply a kind of existential definition of the self, but a definition of the immortal hero. That is, the last lines, not to yield, suggesting a kind of absolute and confident, self-assured existence throughout time. That is, the very fact of facing death, Ulysses guarantees not simply that he can live within it, but triumph over it.
That's more to my liking. Now, I'm going to scroll down one, and we're going to do a couple of other things here. One of the things that I might like to do is compare this poem to other styles of poetry. So I can go up now and I'm going to hit the Explore button, and I'm going to go up and hit Poetry, and then I'm going to compare some styles of poetry, and now I can, as I've moved down through levels of knowledge, I can compare to epic, sonnets, limericks, haiku, rap, free verse, etc. So I'm going to go in, haiku is one that interests me. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to click on haiku and see if we can make a comparison to this.
Haiku is a form of Japanese poetry that relies chiefly on imagery about nature to convey a distinct emotion which results in an intense insight. Haiku is the art of few words and many suggestions.
Now, I'm not convinced that has a lot of significance to this, so I'm going to get rid of it. I just clicked it off. Now, let's go back up. I saw something up here I thought was kind of interesting. We'll hit Explore. We'll hit Poetry. We'll hit Styles. And I'll come back and say, what is this rap thing all about? I've never thought of rap as poetry.
When rappers get defiant, I ain't scared, I'm prepared. Within my realm, no souls are spared. Don't try to read me, you'll be baffled. Before you test me, you best be careful, cause you have no idea where I'm coming from. I be dropping rhymes on drums.
Poetry is rap and rap is poetry. You're trying to tell people what you've been through, how you are, what you've seen, how you react to different situations, and that's what it is. Rap was built on competition, you know, rappers going up against each other. I mean, that's why we did it in the first place, to stop the killing, to stop the fighting against each other. Let's go, you know, battle with lyrics and see who's got a better song, whose lyrics are better, are more tricky.
Maybe poetry has relevance to a 15 or 16-year-old. It did to him. I'd never thought about that, fighting with lyrics instead of fighting with guns and knives. Maybe I should have done this earlier, but I forgot. And one of the capabilities that I have is to go back and put some background material about the Trojan War. We don't teach much Latin, and therefore we don't learn a whole lot about mythology in school today. So I'm going to go back up. I'm going to click on Explore again. This time I'm going to go over and click on Ulysses, and I'm going to click on the Trojan War and see if we can get some background information on the Trojan War.
The story of the Trojan War was told in the great epic, the Iliad, written by the Greek poet Homer. It is a tale of love and war. Long ago, a prince of Troy, Paris, eloped with a Greek queen, Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. He took her back to Troy, a city by the Dardanelles, in what is now Turkey, where his father Priam was king. The Greeks followed with 1,000 ships to take revenge. Their leader was Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. For 10 years they fought in the plain before the city. Many warriors died, including the great Greek warrior Achilles and the hero of Troy, Hector. Ulysses devised the famous trick of the wooden horse, which enabled the Greeks to enter the city. Along with his men, Ulysses hid in the wooden horse, and when finally inside the city's walls, he opened the gates of the city to the Greek warriors. Troy was burned, its people slaughtered, sharing the fate of all victims of war.
I also have the capability to actually go into the poem itself and look at information behind some of the words. For example, let's look and see what's behind Heroic Hearts.
Why are there so many stories of the hero or of heroes in mythology?
Well, because there is a certain typical hero sequence of actions, which can be detected in stories from all over the world and from many, many periods of history. And I think it's essentially, you might say, the one deed done by many, many different people.
In his book, Campbell outlined his idea of the hero's journey that he had seen repeated in cultures throughout the world. He saw the hero as the personification of a culture's mythology. Traditionally, the hero might be a warrior, the ideal of strength and courage. An explorer, the founder of civilizations. A philosopher, an adventurer of the mind. And in the modern world, Campbell would add the artist to the pantheon of heroes. But the journey is essentially the same. One shape-shifting story of the vision quest that transforms the world. Whether it is Odysseus, King Arthur, or Luke Skywalker, the hero is the one who responds to the call to adventure.
I think we need heroes and the myths that the heroes act in, the stories about heroes, as models for our own behavior. It's something to look up to, something to compare ourselves with. And the heroes show us that it's possible for human beings to confront adventure and danger and even death and overcome it somehow. It gives us hope about the battle that life can become.
You know, when I say don't be afraid, you know what I really mean. Don't even be afraid to die.
Now, one of the things that we need to understand about art, and particularly about poetry, I think, is does it have any relevance to today? Does this poem have any meaning to our current 20th century society? And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit interpret. I'm going to hit opinions. And then I'm going to come down and show you a piece where Kincaid and Shore are juxtaposed that I think will throw some light on this subject.
And the more moving of the Kennedy allusions for me has always been Teddy Kennedy at the Democratic Convention, quoting his brother, quoting Ulysses, at the moment when it was clear that Teddy Kennedy had no political future in America, that the Democratic Party was moving in a different direction, that America was moving in a different direction. And he quoted incredibly movingly, I mean, people were in tears in the audience, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And here was this political warrior, this old guy looking pudgy and battered and beautiful, I mean, he looked beautiful, saying, I will not yield, at the moment when he was about to not get the Democratic nomination. And I think that what Kennedy captured was that poignant ambivalence of this poem.
Long after this convention, long after the signs come down and the crowd stop cheering and the band stop playing, may it be said of our campaign that we kept the faith. May it be said of our party in 1980 that we found our faith again. And may it be said of us both in dark passages and in bright days. In the words of Tennyson that my brothers quoted and loved, and that have special meaning for me now, I am a part of all that I have met. Too much is taken, much abides. That which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. For me, a few hours ago, this campaign came to an end. For all those whose cares have been our concern, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die.
Now, we have spent 18 minutes on this Ulysses. How many of you had read Ulysses before today? How many of you understood its meaning? The point I'm making is that I think all of you have a new insight after 18 minutes. I think you have a new insight into this poem, and I think you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about new knowledge and knowledge navigation and the power of this technology to illuminate subjects. Obviously, a poem like Ulysses has a different meaning to each of us, and it should have a different meaning to each of us. To me, the central theme is man's desire to maintain his dignity until death. And I'm sure each of you have your own versions of that. Now, what I'd like to do now, I've got to get back to a little bit different place. Let me see if I can do that. I'm going to go back up to explore. What I hope is going to come up now is a synopsis that will put this whole poem, Ulysses, into a perspective.
It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. Seek a newer world, push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the bars of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulf will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom that which we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.